Hello, and welcome to this week's reflection on the Bible. Last week, you may recall me asking us to make room for God, and we continue with this theme today as we come to study Mark chapter 9, verses 2 to 9. And today, we find out how making room for Jesus leads three disciples into a deeper knowledge and understanding of Jesus as the Messiah and the Son of God. So it is to the opening verse of this passage that I refer you now. Here we find out that Jesus has taken Peter, James, and John with him, led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. Peter, James, and John had trusted Jesus from the first moment when he had said to them, "Follow me," at the beginning of his ministry. They had decided that they would follow him. And so when Jesus asked them to accompany him, they set off. Perhaps this had happened before and was nothing out of the ordinary. Perhaps this time had a feel of something different or special about it. We don't know. But what we do know is that when Jesus called their names, they followed. Jesus has called each one of us to follow him, and especially now as we approach the season of Lent. So I issue this challenge this morning. Will you hear Jesus call your name and then follow him? Yes, it's your name that he's calling. Back to the Bible. Notice that Jesus led them up a high mountain. Many of us are used to going out for walks, and even during lockdown, some of us have found paths from our own front doors that have taken us into new areas of countryside, down new paths that were always there, but we had never taken before. 18 months ago, Steve and I were on holiday in Jordan, and we went on a guided walk up the tallest mountain in Jordan. I have never been so grateful for a guide in all my life. The higher we walked, the harder it became to identify the path. And I remember literally putting my foot in the place where the guide had stepped only moments before. But none of that would have happened if I had not made room in my life for this experience. Similarly, Peter, James, and John were led by Jesus, and that would have involved them watching carefully where he put his feet and copying his moves to enable them to travel together. Being led in by Jesus in our context today may be less physical, but as we make room for Jesus, guided in our daily readings, in our daily and weekly prayers, in our reaching out to others with acts of kindness and generosity, we know that we are following in his footsteps. Notice too, Jesus led them up a high mountain. This meant effort. It meant getting hot and bothered, dusty and dirty, being out of breath without knowing where they were going or why. Do we make that much effort to be with Jesus? This coming season of Lent, we have the opportunity to read, pray, and serve, often without leaving the comfort of our armchairs. Nevertheless, it will take effort. It will be inconvenient at times to stop what we are doing to pray. We might get flustered at having to join another Zoom meeting as we're asked to pray for Brampton. All sorts of things might get in the way, but let's encourage one another to keep going. Then finally, notice that Jesus led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. Mark wants us to know something here as he emphasizes the disciples are both apart and by themselves. There are times when we too have to make room to be apart and by ourselves with Jesus. The season of Lent gives us such a time as we find ways to be apart from others and to be ourselves with Jesus. This might involve silence. It might involve listening to music and worship songs. It might involve reading Mark's Gospel in one sitting. Perhaps it will involve gardening or a long walk in the countryside, or sitting still with children. Wherever Jesus leads us apart and by ourselves, we can be sure that he is there with us. When we read on in this passage, we find that the disciples were rewarded for having made room for Jesus with an experience of the full glory of Jesus, affirmation of him as Messiah, and repetition of the overshadowing and the voice urging them to listen to the beloved Son. The voice of God spoke to them. This Lent, may we also glimpse something of the glory of Jesus. May we also know him more fully to be our Saviour and Messiah. And may we be reminded to listen to him as we find ourselves overshadowed by God the Spirit and hear the voice of God the Father. This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him. On Wednesday morning at 10:30, we mark the first day of Lent and begin our walk with Jesus with a service of reflection and commitment. Whether you are able to join us over phone church on that morning, or whether you mark the first day of Lent in some other way by yourself, know that you and us, we are being led by Jesus. God bless you. Bye-bye.